Hello, this is Jay Scott, and you are listening to The Hook, the Ultimate Rock Community Podcast. Hope everyone's having a great day. I'd like to welcome in from Aeraco, from Chicago, Illinois, my hometown. I'd like to welcome in Ace, the lead vocalist, co-lead guitar player, into our new music spotlight. How you doing today, Ace?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you doing this. This is great. We kind of spoke briefly before we started. Saw you guys with Diamond Head about a year and a half ago. It was an amazing show. I took my son with me, who I think was 12 or 13 at the time. He follows you guys on Instagram. He's a huge fan himself.
Cool.
Great live band. Great. You guys just blew me away.
Thanks, man. That was, like I said, that was a fun show. It was a good time. Really good crowd. Diamond Head were just a really fun band. To listen to, those guys was just surreal. I remember growing up listening to old VPs and old vinyls and EPs, and getting to play with Diamond Head was a pleasure. And then the audience on top of it, great audience, great crowd, really responsive. It's a really good time.
Yeah, it definitely was. Well, as we begin the show, every time we have a new guest for the first time, we always start with the first question, and that really is what the show is about. And just like every rock song has a hook that sucks you in, every rock fan has a moment, whether it's a song, an album, a band, a performance, that hooked them on rock and roll. What hooked you, Ace?
It kind of came in stages for me. I grew up listening, like I said, all LPs, vinyls, but my dad always played blues guys, so I grew up listening. We're from Chicago, man, so I always grew up kind of listening to Buddy Guy, Stuart Summerall, Howlin' Wolf, B. King, Stevie Ray Vaughan. I know some of those guys are Chicago, some of them aren't, but I grew up listening to the blues, and that's kind of what my dad got me into. My dad wasn't a metal guy at all, wasn't a hard rock guy at all. So for a pretty long time, I would listen to, Muddy Waters and, just kind of Johnny Lee Hooker, everything that was coming out of Chicago way back when. And that's what I grew up listening to. And my horizon really wasn't expanded to metal or hard rock as of yet. It wasn't until, I think it was an old Cadillac commercial that had Crazy Train on it. I don't know if you remember that, but I remember listening to that lick when I was really young, probably like 6 or 7 years old, going, man, what the hell is that? That's awesome. And my uncle was like, oh, that's Crazy Train. My uncle was more the hard rock guy, and he said, oh, that's Crazy Train. And, I just look back. That was the beginning of the hard rock phase. And then it turned into metal through, of course, Metallica. I heard the hook, Off to Never Neverland on the radio. Went to my guitar teacher, and I was like, yo, this track is insane. I want to learn it. What is he doing? How is he playing this? So it kind of came in stages. It was blues first. I think the one song I can remember from being really young, like 4 or 5 years old, was Got My Mojo Working by Muddy Waters. That was the big one. And then Crazy Train was like the next evolution, Randy Rhoads. And then the next evolution, getting even heavier, was Metallica.
It's funny how you mentioned Chicago and the blues. I think when you grow up in Chicago or the suburbs of Chicago, you are exposed to it, whether you like it or not. Because blues, especially back, years ago, it was just a huge element in the scene here in Chicago. My big introduction to the blues was the Blues Brothers. That movie was released in 79 or 80, and I think I was probably like 7 or 8 years old when I watched it with my dad. And I remember I never really heard the blues that much, or was aware of it, I should say, until that movie. And then I started hearing my relatives playing it at parties, and I got more into it, and I was a really big Magic Sam fan and Otis Rush, 2 guys from Chicago. But it always becomes a part of you, especially in this town, because it is so prevalent, it is so influential, and you really can't get away with it whether you want to or not. It's just going to be there all the time.
Yeah, it's kind of embedded everywhere you go here. It's a pretty big part of our, Chicago history, because there's so many prominent musicians that have come out of here that are in the blues genre. But even when you're playing metal or hard rock, even then it's hard to deny the blues roots. A lot of the scales that you play, a lot of things that are involved with the composition of various styles of music are all related to, you can trace most of those back, if not all of them, to the blues. The scales that you use, the way you compose, the way, that you play blues, blues riffs in 1-4-5. You build on the 5 when when you're trying to make a build. A lot of music still does that till this very day. A lot of pop music, R&B music, rock, hard rock, heavy metal, this really doesn't matter. So, I know there's various forms of blues all around the United States, but of course Chicago is going to be the one that hits home the most for me, because this is where I'm from.
Yeah, my son is playing guitar, and I always tell him whenever we're riding around and driving somewhere and I got my music playing and I'm playing maybe some old school metal or whatever it is, I go, slow that down. I go, if you slow that down, that's a blues song. He's like, what do you mean? I go, listen to the riff. It's sped up. It's heavier. Yeah, it's got that metal, vibe to it. But if you slow it down and just make it bare bones, what you talked about with the scales, it's a blues song, basically. And he's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm like, listen to You Got Another Thing Coming by Judas Priest. He's like, slow that riff down in between his vocals. That riff that is in between, basically that's a blues song. If you slow it down and you strip away all the the effects of the guitar and everything on it. So
you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So the blues, you mentioned some old school stuff like Crazy Train and Metallica. Who was it? Was it a song? Was it a band that made you want to pick up a guitar?
Okay. Well, I guess I skipped an evolution in that case. That's an easy one. So that would be Highway to Hell. Heard Highway to Hell on the radio for the first time I can remember when I was probably like 5 or 6 years old. I went to my dad and I said, hey, do you know the band Highway to Hell? And he goes, well, no, that's not the band. That's the song. The band is AC/DC. And I said, okay, well, can I see him? Can you get a VHS tape, or can we go to the store and, the local video store, and can we grab a VHS? I want to see what they look like. And, we grabbed it, and, I went and I grabbed the broomstick when I was 6 years old, and I started headbanging like Angus Young and, jumping around the room. And I said, hey, Dad, I think I found something I love to do. And he thought it was a phase. He was like, all right, whatever, So about 2 years of me headbanging with this damn broom, my dad was like, okay, maybe it's not a phase. You've been doing this for a while. Let's go grab you a guitar. So by the time I got my first guitar, everything started kind of moving in a rock direction. I started kind of moving, I don't want to say away from the blues, because all the bands that I went to are all blues, have a foundation in blues, like AC/DC. By the time I got my first guitar, I was really into Aerosmith. Loved Joe Perry. Loved Steven Tyler. Brad Whitford. I love those guys. So kind of going back to answer your question, so I was kind of long-winded there for a minute. But yeah, Highway to Hell, AC/DC, Angus Young.
Was there a band or performer that made you want to perform live?
My dad was a musician when he was younger, and I think that we've always kind of had that ham bone sort of lineage in our system. My grandfather was a pretty, he was a showman. My dad was a showman. I was always kind of a comedic guy in class and school. I always kind of, I don't want to say dominated conversation, but I'd always been a confident guy. And it's not to say that I'm a great front man. I like to think that I do a pretty good job, but at the same time, there's common similarities that you'll find with all really great frontmen. It's the fact that they have a commanding stage presence. Whether they were shy off stage or they had that same sort of vibe off stage, really on stage is when they really dialed in or they zoned in. So, no, it's always been pretty, I've always wanted to perform. I've always itched to be on stage, but someone that I truly idolize and who kind of sets a bar that is so freaking high, you can only hope to attain 25% of what he was is Freddie Mercury. That's always been kind of, the gold standard of a frontman. I look at that and I'm like I said, hell, if I could be a molecular piece of as good as that guy was performing live, I would feel like I've done something with my life.
Yeah, no, you bring up a great point. That was the era of the frontman. I mean, you think of Freddie Mercury, you think of David Lee Roth, who came a little later than Freddie did, but they kind of merged eras together at some point. I remember when you mentioned about getting a VHS and you wanted to see what this band looked like. When I was younger, I remember hearing Van Halen 1, and the only image I've had of them was the back cover of the record until I saw the U.S. Festival in 1983 on television, on cable. And, seeing Dave Lee Roth up there, seeing Eddie Van Halen, seeing the bands that were performing before them, such as Scorpions and Ozzy Osbourne and, Quiet Riot, Judas Priest, a few others. It was electrifying. It grabbed your attention. They were the commanding presence that you talked about. All those guys had the crowd, no matter if it was 50 people or 200,000 people. They held everybody in the palm of their hand. They had the control.
Yeah. It's, you mentioned an interesting band there. Van Halen. So David Lee Roth is definitely one of my favorite singers. But I'm kind of biased there because me and him have the same birthday, actually. So It's a pleasure to share the birthday with Diamond Dave if he ever listens to this. But love David Lee Roth, love Van Halen. Those were just guys that were, they were unapologetic. They commanded your attention. It was very difficult to not pay attention. It doesn't seem to be, I don't want to say it doesn't seem to be as common. It just seems to be harder to find now in today's musical climate. It's not as, I don't know. It's more difficult to find. Maybe because it's a noisy market. Maybe because there's so many bands out there. Maybe because there's so much stuff out there, and there's been such a hyperinflation of music and bands. And I don't say it's a bad thing. I don't say it's a good thing. But it's just refreshing when you get to see a guy like Raz from Diamond Head. He's a great example. He's a great freaking singer. He's a great guy. But to see a frontman like that. Now in this climate, in the new generation of musicians, it's an interesting time and place.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a conversation I've had with many about the frontman of today. I grew up in that era of frontman, where everybody who was in a band and everybody that was on MTV had that face of the band that you undeniably knew that was the singer. That was, whether what was going on behind the stage or backstage or what their business was, the singer was out front and center. It created such an entertainment type of thing, like it wasn't just guys up there playing. It was guys up there playing and this guy jumping around, catering to the crowd, getting the crowd pumped up and motivated and screaming and yelling back and everything. And it was just like, wow,
Yeah, they were the, I almost compare them to wrestlers. I'm a bit of a wrestling fan. It's like you got guys like Macho Man. You got Randy Savage. You got like that. Who are just they're you can't deny it. There's an aura about them. They're there to entertain. They're there to just kind of metaphorically punch you right in the face with so much charisma, so much personality. It's almost like a stimulation overload. And it's like, I think it was Lemmy who said it, that, people don't go to a show to see their neighbor. They're going to a show to see a freaking alien, man. They're going to a show to see, something that they can't see every day.
Right.
So you show up, you get a t-shirt, get your shorts on, you're just kind of like, all right, this next song is called, We're Awesome. You're kind of like, okay, whatever. I could watch this shit at home,
Well, that's
when they go, they want to see something entertaining. You know what I mean?
Well, that's funny you mentioned that. I took my son to another show. I don't want to mention the guy or the band. That's not what the purpose is. But my son asked me about one of the bands that played on the bill afterwards. He's like, "Oh, what did you think of so-and-so?" And I said, "Oh, the singer was good, but he looked like he just came from a barbecue." He's like, "What do you mean?" I said, it wasn't anything special. It was just kind of like showed up, hat on backwards, shorts, jean shorts and boots and a flannel t-shirt or a t-shirt. And that was it. I'm like, he looked like, someone that was just eating barbecue chicken about an hour ago. So, and I don't think he understood that. And then when I took him to see Iron Maiden, Bruce Dickinson was out there. I'm like, that's how it's done. That's how it's done right there.
Yeah. Bruce Dickinson is another just freaking insane example of a great frontman. That whole band really is incredible. But I think of it as, I'm naturally a pretty outgoing guy. So when I'm on stage, it doesn't feel like it's out of place. I've been doing it long enough where I don't really, any musician will tell you this. You're always going to have some form of nerves, but when you've been doing it long enough, it's another day at the office, man. You're there to have a good time. You're there to create good vibes, good energy. But you didn't tell me if I can, but am I able to swear?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Where the fuck have the guitar heroes gone, man? Where the fuck have the frontman gone? Where the fuck has the personality in the character fucking gone? It's like, to me, it's not cool to do a guitar solo anymore. It's not cool to have an impressive range anymore. It's not cool to go out of your way to do the craziest shit to make people feel entertained. Like, the minute you do something theoretically inclined, it's just odd, and there's so many bands out. It's not to take away from bands that are theoretically inclined and that are soloing. It doesn't seem to be like, it just doesn't seem to be like the highlight. I remember when I was growing up, me and other guitar players in the neighborhood, we would compete, man. We'd be like, man, I learned the solo to Fade to Black. Oh yeah, I learned the solo to this Dream Theater song. Oh yeah, I learned the solo to this Iron Maiden song. We didn't sit there. Nobody in my neighborhood bragged about the fucking rhythms they wrote. Nobody. None of us did. We all went, and it was about how fast and fucking mean and how just speedy and ready you were, and how crazy you could get your guitar to sound. And it just doesn't really seem to be that way. And it's not to discredit what's going on. It's not to credit what's going on. It's just more or less like, I want to be the guy that knows my fucking instrument. I want to be the guy that really knows what the hell I'm doing and can play, a wide variety of things that you throw my way. I also want to be the guy that can be a great front man, write great music that's relatable, and write great songs. But I don't know. We've moved in a weird direction, man. I don't know if you're in agreement there, but we've moved in an interesting direction.
I am in agreement. I think, the period after the millennium change, what was it, Y2K as they call it? I think that decade after that was a kind of a lost period in rock and roll. You had a lot of like these college party bands kind of come up, and a lot of them were cookie cutter, and they didn't really distinguish. There was not a lot of new hard rock. There were a few bands, but I think over the last decade, and I think especially over the last 5 years, I think it is starting to come back. I do agree with what you're saying. I mean, where are the days, when I grew up? I mean, I grew up in the era of Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads and George Lynch and, all the shredders that were on Shrapnel Records, like Tony McAlpine and Jason Becker and Richie Kotzen and Marty Friedman, all these guys. Yeah. Paul Gilbert, Red Beach, all these guys were players. I don't see a lot of those guys, but I think it's coming back. I think, in terms of guitar, I've seen in the last year, Tyler Bryant twice. Amazing guitar player. Tyler Bryant and the Shakedown is an amazing band, amazing guitar player who will jam. And I think the other guitar player in that band is Brad Whitford from Aerosmith's son, who does some of the leads too, and he's great. I think the guy from the Struts, Luke Spiller, I've seen him live. I looked at my friend, I'm like, that's old school frontman right there. I mean, whether you like him or not, if you get a chance to see him, that's old school frontman type deal right there.
That's the thing though. A guy like Spiller, and I know I've had a chance to see the Struts live too. And regardless of what my opinion is, you're going to leave with an opinion.
Right.
That's the point. That's the point. It's the willingness to be loved, but at the same time, the willingness to be hated as well.
Exactly.
And maybe there's a lot of people that fear that. They just want to focus on that low-hanging fruit of being loved by a community where they know they're going to be loved by, as opposed to being an individual who you're going to love or you're going to hate them. There's no way you can walk away from going to a Struts show and saying, I thought the singer he's okay. You're either going to go, oh, dude, I think he's a total copycat. I think he's this. I think he's that. I think he's this. Or you're going to go, dude, I think he's one of the greatest frontman that's around right now. It really doesn't matter. You're going to have an opinion of the guy, and that's the point.
Mm-hmm.
The point is that they have the name circulating. You're chatting about him. You're talking about him, and you're creating that dialogue. It really doesn't matter what the opinion is. There's no doubt. There's a great voice there. I saw him with the Foo Fighters when they brought him up for the Under Pressure duet where, what the hell's his name?
Dave Grohl?
Taylor Hawkins.
Taylor Hawkins, yes.
Taylor Hawkins did the singing, and then they brought Taylor up to do the singing from the Struts. And it was great. It was great. You could sit there and you could go, hey, man, this guy is this and that and this and that. But that's the point. You're talking about that this guy is this and that. And I think that's one of the components of being a great frontman, not giving a shit if people love you or hate you, just being genuine, being true, and just saying, hey, I'm going to be unapologetically me, and I'm going to find the people that love me, and I'm going to focus on them.
You're absolutely right. One of the conversations I've had with a few people once I've started doing this is how rock bands almost seem afraid to push the boundaries. Afraid to be controversial, afraid to be themselves, like you said. There's a lot of great new bands out there that are coming, but there's also some bands too that are very cookie cutter and are very afraid to take chances, afraid to sound different, afraid to do something different. I can tell you, just with the experience I've had in the last few years and seen a lot of newer bands, I think there is a wave coming of that mentality. I mentioned Tyler Bryant. I think you guys fit that bill too. I think bands like Joyous Wolf, who's got a great sound and a great vibe to them. There's so many others out there too that just do an awesome, wonderful job. I saw Sebastian Bach a couple weeks ago, who was playing local here in the Chicago area. He's 50-something years old, still sounded incredible, but still had that presence, man. Still had that, you can't take your eyes off of him.
Well, Bach is hard not to pay attention to. He's got a voice that's just unprecedented. But yeah, I mean, Joyce Wolf, great. We're kind of semi-family with those guys. We've got some of the same people that work in our camp, work for the Joyce Wolf camp as well. You got other bands like Blacktop Mojo that are just ridiculously talented guys.
Great band.
Great freaking band. Matt James has a voice that you just can't mistake for anybody. But, the only way anything cool gets created is by pushing the boundaries. When Metallica came out, Megadeth came out, Anthrax, Testament, when those guys were coming out, that was a new scene. They were creating their own scene. They were creating their own thing that was going on. That's why they left LA, because LA had its own thing going on. They had hair metal. They had Poison and Motley Crue, and they had the Van Halens. They had all that stuff. They had to leave. They said, hey, we're going to push the envelope, but this isn't the environment to do it. We're going to go up to San Francisco. We're going to have Cliff Burton join this thing, and we're going to make our own shit happen. And they created their own thing. I forgot who said it. I think Corey Taylor said it. He said the music industry tends to reinvent itself about once every 15, 20 years or so. And I can't agree with that statement more, because you had hair metal, and then you had grunge, and then you had new metal, although I don't really like calling it that, but you had bands like Avenged Sevenfold, you had bands like Korn, you had bands like Disturbed that came out, and now those were the early 2000s. System of a Down was another one, but now you have it about 15 years later, where now there's this new, there's something new going on, and I can feel it. The music industry has been in an interesting spot, but it's getting in a very interesting spot in regards to new talent and new people that are rising up. So it's interesting to be, I don't want to say in the mix of that with Aeraco, because I don't want to, I don't want to come off as, a narcissistic prick, but it's nice to be it's nice to be in the middle of that, at least in regards to touring with some of these bands and performing with some of these artists and getting to witness firsthand the pleasure that Aeraco has to share the stage with some fucking awesome young talent, man. It is really awesome for us to witness, not only as fans, as concert goers, but also as musicians ourselves, and getting to share the stage with some of these other bands.
I agree 100%, man. And you can definitely include yourself in that conversation. Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Final question on, your influences. I've read a lot of different interviews over the years, and one of the things that's always struck me is how artists will say, I heard this song and I wanted to write music after I heard it. It made me think about arranging music and writing lyrics. Was there someone for you that influenced you to do that?
To write lyrics or just write music in general?
To write music, to write songs.
That's a good question. I don't really know. I don't think it was a musical influence per se. I just think it's a life influence. I think that a good song is defined by conveying a particular emotion, and a song is an emotional journal. So if somebody opens up that song and they feel what you were feeling at the time, or they get some sort of glimpse at the emotion that you're trying to convey, then that's what defines a really good song to me. It doesn't matter if it's pop, it doesn't matter if it's rap or R&B or whatever the case may be. I'm not, I don't discriminate based on genre. I really don't care. I'll listen to everything. If you look at my playlist, I have so many guilty freaking pleasures in my playlist. It's not even funny because it's just a good song. At the end of the day, you can't deny what is a good song. I've always taken inspiration from everything, whether it be music, whether it be poetry. Huge movie guy. I do some acting here and work with some actors in Chicago to do some acting as well. So I've always been a huge movie guy. Poetry, music, just life in general, the experiences, the hassle of having to go to a fucking 9 to 5 and answer to some guy, and just the anger that builds up and all that shit just contributes to the musical factor. In fact, most of the songs that I've written, most of the best songs I feel as though I've written are songs where I didn't even have a guitar in front of me. I didn't even have a musical instrument in front of me. They were just melodies in my head that were inspired on the cusp of just fucking living life, just being a person, experiencing something and going, that pisses me off, and I got a melody in my head for it. Or that makes me sad, depressed, and I got something for that. Or this makes me ridiculously happy, or this makes me curious or inquisitive, and these melodies pop up. So it's just, I take inspiration from a lot of bands, a lot of singers, a lot of guitar players, a lot of genres, a lot of producers, a lot of different people that do a lot of different stuff. And it ain't necessarily proprietary music. It's just proprietary just being a human and living life, man. I know it's a very hippie answer, but it's about as true as I can get on that one.
No, man, great answer. No, that's some people are inspired by a song. Some people are just have the creative, juices in their belly and just need an outlet, for what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
So let's dive into Aeraco. 2015, All or Nothing. 2017, Baptized by Fire. How and what is the history of Aeraco?
Man, this thing goes way back. So I used to play in a band with my dad when I was a teenager, which at the time was one of the most miserable experiences of my life because it was with my dad. He liked music that just wasn't cool to me. I'm sitting there learning I Know a Little from Leonard Skinner and shit like that, and Stevie Ray Vaughan songs and The Doors songs, just music that I really wasn't into. Now that my musical palette has aged, I can appreciate that stuff. I love it because it helped cultivate what kind of guitar player I am today and knowing how talented and what great songwriters those were. But when I was playing with my dad, we were auditioning drummers, and Misfit came into audition. He was like a deer in headlights, man. He's I think he's a year or two younger than me, so he must have been like 14, 15 years old. Came into audition. At that point, I think he just started, so he just wasn't really there, I guess. And he disappeared off the face of the earth. I think my dad made him join, Misfit joined the witness protection program after he met my dad, because my dad is the most intense Vietnam War veteran you've ever met. He meets this 13, 14-year-old kid, and he's like, how you doing? You know, he's fucking super in your face, super intimidating. And Misfit in reality is he's a pretty laid back guy. He's really not into all the confrontational personality type stuff. So he basically joined the witness protection program for about, I want to say, probably about 9 years. I've never heard from him. And so finally, when I got out of school, I started working in finance. I stopped playing music for a while because I was tired of dealing with musicians. I was tired of dealing with bandmates. I was just tired of dealing with people that weren't as serious as I was. And I kind of turned my back on it. I said, you know what, fuck it. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm just going to sell out to 9 to 5 and sell my soul to the devil and make some money. And, a couple of years of denying who you are as a musician will lead to some pretty severe depression and anxiety. And, you feel like you turn your back on something that was important to you. So I said, you know what, I'm going to get back into this thing. I'm going to start a band again. So right when I did that, I was looking for a drummer. Misfit reached out to me and said, hey, I'm looking for a guitar player for my band. And I said, well, that's interesting because I'm looking for a drummer for my band. And he said, I'll make you a deal. I'll come audition for you if you come audition for me. And I said, all right, deal. So he came by, he auditioned for me. It was not a good audition, not on his behalf. He auditioned very well, but there were just numerous logistical things that were not working out that day. And then after that audition, he said, all right, I'll see you tomorrow because you're going to come audition for me. And I was just kind of like, ah, shit. All right. I had no intentions of going and auditioning. I was just hoping he would want to join my band. So I held my end of the bargain, though. I went to the audition. I get there, and Spidey comes out. And, Spidey's a pretty bulky dude. Looks very much like he's got a very much like a Dimebag Darrell sort of look. And he pulls out a Diamond Head guitar. He pulls out a Razorback from Dean. And I remember thinking to myself, and we're going, oh, God, please do not let this be like a terrible Dimebag beginner kit. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not taking a shit on people who are just starting. I was just so afraid that he just wasn't going to be able to play. He's got this really expensive, really badass guitar. He's really quiet. And I'm like, oh, man, I hope, I just didn't fucking drive an hour down to the south side to waste my time. And I learned my lesson, man. I never prejudged a book by its cover since that day, because he got on the guitar and he just started shredding. And I was like, dude, stop. Hang on. You guys have a singer for the band. And they said, no, we were hoping after we got you for guitar, we could we hope you'd know some singers. And I said, all right, we don't have a singer. Do you have a microphone? I said, yes. So set up a microphone. I started singing. We were drinking the whole time. We got fucked up and drunk. And finally they sat me down after this audition and they said, so what do you think, man? Do you want to join the band? And I said, you guys actually want me to join the band? And they said, yeah. I go, God, you guys have the bar set low. I'm fucking wasted. I don't even know if I played anything right. And they were like, nah, man, you'd be great. You sound great. We were hoping maybe you'd want to sing for us too. And I was so impressed by just how, they weren't tainted. You know what I mean? They hadn't dealt with enough of shitheads at that point to be angry or to be mad. It was just genuine, heartfelt love for music. It wasn't tainted. It wasn't tarnished. And I missed that. I know I'm talking like I was this seasoned warhorse, but I had been through enough bands at that point where I was tainted, man. I had a weird understanding of what a band was, and to come across these guys that were just so fresh and wanted to play so bad and just wanted to write music and just play and tour, and I fucking missed that. And I just said, you know what? Whatever project I'm working on, I'm going to turn my back on. I'm gonna disband those guys. I'm gonna tell them, "Hey, listen, man, thanks for wanting to do this, but I'm gonna fully commit to these guys down on the south side because I think we got some magic happening." So it was me, Misfit, and Spivey, and bass player at the time who we're still very great friends. He actually does all the design work for our website, photos. But we went through a couple bass player lineup changes, finally settled on Beast, who is a godsend of a bass player. And 2 albums later, 2 singles later, a couple, national tours under our belt. Here we are, man. That was that started back in 2013. And 6-7 years later, here we are.
That's an awesome story, man. That's really cool. When I hear you guys play, I hear a lot of different things. I hear a very modern sound, but I hear influences of like Helloween and Accept. I hear like Tigers of Pantang and Metal Church and Armored Saint, of course, Diamond Head that we mentioned. I hear a little bit of Dokken too as well. Is that all? All you guys, how is that all that, how do all those influences come out? Where does all that come from?
So I think each of us have pretty different backgrounds that are pretty polarizing in regards to how we became musicians and how we studied and how we formally approached our instruments. I went to school for it. I took lessons for it. So I'm more of the theoretical guy where I understand, how to compose a song. And I mean that with the utmost humility. I'm still perfecting my craft, but learning from a theoretical perspective on how to orchestrate and piece together a song, what's going to make a good verse, what'll make a good chorus, how do we build the momentum here, how do we lay out a decent solo, whereas Spidey knows everything by happy notes and sad notes. He doesn't understand major, minor, chords. He doesn't get any of that shit. He's just trained strictly by ear. And from me being kind of on the theory side, I actually envy him in a way because the theory doesn't inhibit his process. It doesn't hold him back. There's times he kind of tosses a hodgepodge of shit my way and says, "Hey, I think this is a song. Let me know what you think." And I go, "Dude, this is the wackiest. This makes no sense, but somehow it sounds good." So we'll kind of mix our version of, someone who's had lessons and someone who studied it and has gone to school for it, and someone who has no theoretical understanding but just knows how to write great freaking metal and great rock, and the ability to combine that. Our influences are completely different. That's a guy who can go from Cannibal Corpse to Dying Fetus to Slayer to Testament to just heavy stuff. And that's not my go-to. I've always been more of, the 80s guy. I've always been more of, the Randy Rhoads, the Van Halen, the AC/DC. I'm going to admit it. I freaking love Def Leppard. I've been always more of that. So it's this interesting combination of me loving the 80s and kind of bringing an old school way of writing to Aeraco and bringing that theoretical side, and him loving newer modern music and bringing that to the table with a completely just unhinged way of writing with no boundaries and no rules and, fuck this key change, screw this relative major shit, let's write this, let's do this. And it creates a mixture where you recognize the old school 80s influences, like you mentioned, Dokken and Helloween and Armored Saint, and the newer stuff with the production, the way that we finalize our songs and things like that. So it's an interesting melting pot, I think.
Well, you talked about it. So is this part of the creative process? How do you guys build a song? How do you guys build material? Does everybody come in with different ideas and you can either stick with that main idea, or does one person add one thing and so on and so forth?
We throw some shit at the wall, man. And we see what sticks. I think I'm kidding, but partially not. I think everything is riff-based. to us, it all starts with the guitars because it's a very guitar-heavy band. Both of us can, we can hold our weight, I think, pretty well when it comes to soloing, when it comes to playing, when it comes to just performing at a very high standard. I think we both carry our weight pretty well. So it always starts with a good guitar riff. You got to have a good, chunky, beefy riff. And we're always very fascinated with melody. I think we tend to stick with melody a lot. So it's very melodic writing on the guitar side. So it's always just kind of saying, hey man, I got this cool riff. What do you think of it? And then we'll start messing with this little diddly of a riff. He'll kind of harmonize it and be like, all right, cool. What do you think of this harmony? He's definitely the harmony guy when it comes to guitar. What do you think of this harmony? So we'll kind of move the notes around a little bit, kind of critique the melody. And then once we got that down, Misfit and Beast are definitely the percussive side. So they're looking at, how do we accent this? How do we complement this from a rhythmic and a percussive point of view? And then once that is done, the lyrics that I write are very kind of they're very a cappella. I'll play it. I'll record the riffs on my phone. I'll listen to them, and then I'll just kind of spewing out shit out of my mouth, lines, words, whatever is kind of come into my mind and my heart at the minute, whatever the music is speaking to me. And that's actually exactly how the song Lullaby happened. Lullaby is a staple to the set. We have to play it every time, especially here in Chicago.
It's a great song.
Lullaby. I appreciate that. That song is about our guitar player's mother who passed away when he was a teenager, about 10 years ago or so. And he brought me this riff, and he said, hey, man, I don't really have a lot of material right now, but I have this one song. It means a lot to me. I don't have a name for it. I don't have anything. I don't know what the verse is, the chord. I don't know shit. But all I know is this is a song, and I want to use this. And I said, okay, well, send it to me. So he sent it to me. And I said, hey, man, well, what's the name of this? And he said, I don't really have a name for it. I go, dude, you got to have it saved in your phone as something. There's got to be something. He goes, all right, well, I always called it Lullaby. And I said, okay. He said, but you don't need to keep the name of that song. We don't need to. You could name it whatever you want. So I'm listening to the chorus and the verse part, and I go, okay, this is the verse. This is going to be my chorus. And immediately when the guitar player started playing, a cappella just started kind of going through the words in my head where it said, I've come to realize life is not just organized in time. It has a deeper meaning. Mother, you taught me something. And fucking immediately I'm like, I know this is going to be about my guitar player's mother. And then it came to the chorus where it said, Mother, please don't make me cry. I don't know how to say goodbye because even though I'm a man, I still need your lullaby. And it's like, dude, I would have never guessed you would have kept the name. I would have never guessed that this was the direction the song was going. And I said, hey, man, you gave me that name. It fed that little nanosecond of creative juice in my mind to point me in the right direction. I listened to it. This is what I fed off of it. And honestly, that's kind of the process and the method that happens with a majority of Aeraco songs.
A very interesting way of processing a song and developing a song.
It's interesting because none of us, we're kind of a motherless band. We've same thing with my bassist mother. Unfortunately, passed away. God rest her soul too. Bassist. Same thing with our guitar player. My drummer's parents divorced. He was raised by his dad. My parents divorced, raised by my dad. So we all come from father, households where we all had good dads who stayed in our lives. They had their issues going on, but they all stayed in our lives, and they all introduced us to metal. They introduced us to music and rock, and that was the parent. That was the other parent. So it almost wasn't like a single family household. It was almost like there was a couple. It's just the other couple wasn't the mom. It was the music that helped raise us,
No, that's an interesting bond and connection that you guys all have. That's something that is very unique, I could imagine, but also kind of a special thing too as well. It kind of connects all of you guys, on your journey with rock and roll.
It does.
So All or Nothing 2015, Baptized by Fire 2017, Dark Star Records is who you guys are hooked up with. How did that come about?
I'm always kind of busting down doors and booting in doors and breaking down walls, trying to, meet new people and network. And we've had the pleasure of working with a very talented Drake Mafesta. If you like interesting music projects, I highly recommend all your listeners to check out Dia Morte. Very interesting. Drake Mafesta, very interesting guy, very interesting show, very talented artist though. He's done album cover artwork for some massive bands, and he's a dear friend of ours. He actually did the artwork for Baptized by Fire. And as we were recording that, I started to kind of get wind of the fact that he knew some people. He had some musical connections. So I called him one day, and I'm like, hey, man, who do you know that might be able to give us a hand up? Who do you know that might be able to believe in what we're doing? Because we've always felt like the underdogs, that the industry wants, I think the industry doesn't know what they want, but the industry wants what's hot now. They want to work with people that's hot now. So for a band like us that has, that 80s sound with a little bit of modern mixed in, we've always felt like we've fought an uphill battle to be like, yo, this is good shit. People who listen to this genuinely enjoy it and they like it. So I was talking to Drake and I said, hey man, who do you know that might feel as though the same man we do? Who do you know that might be just as excited as we are to jam with our music? And he said, I know some guys over at Sony Darkstar Records who might dig your stuff. Let's chat. So we had some conversations with Darkstar. They really wound up loving it. And we signed a deal with them.
Hey, if you got the connections and you're in a position where you want to move forward, you got to use them. That's what it's all about. There's so many artists over the years that maybe didn't have the connection that they need, were never able to get the exposure that they probably deserved. So it's not, it's never a bad thing to utilize that stuff.
Never, no. And my feedback is that anybody who's listening right now, if they're going to listen to any segment, if they're going to even listen to a portion of this segment, this would be the portion that I'd want them to listen to right here. If they're going to click through this stream and go, what's interesting? If you catch this, make your own fucking connection. Do your work. Go out, put the work in. There's no such thing as luck. There's no such thing as chance. Just forget all about that shit, man. Go out, work, play, bust your ass, and good shit is bound to happen. There's no way. We've been told so many times in our musical career, oh, you know how lucky you have to be, you know what the chances are. And I'm like, for someone who opens a restaurant, the failure rate for a business owner is like in the 90th percentile in their first 5 years. And they've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, into their product, their brand, their stock, their food, their supply chain. I'm not even investing that much. I'm just saying I want to be in a band. And there's no way that those same people who claim that it's luck, you're not going to tell me that if they were sitting in front of David Lee Roth or Steven Tyler or Sebastian Bach or any of these guys, that they would have the balls to tell them, you got lucky. Because all of those musicians would sit in front of them and laugh. They would say, you know how many empty bars I had to play? Do you know how many shitty shows? Do you know how much money I have stolen from me? You know how many nights where I didn't eat, I didn't sleep, that I was kneeling down in a shower crying because I didn't know if this was right for my life, if I was making the right decision, or if I would just be some 60-year-old washed-up musician, but something drove me to keep going. It's not luck that got me to where I am. It's the fact that I denied that fear the ability to win, and I kept going. So without this becoming like an over-the-top Tony Robbins speech, because I don't mean that. All I mean is fuck all that side noise, all those side conversations. If you love something and music is what you love, and it just so happens to be hard rock or metal, fuck all the noise, through all the side conversations, go for it, don't stop, keep going. Break down walls, bash through fucking obstacles and barriers, and you're gonna win. You're gonna make momentum, and you're gonna gain ground. That's what you gotta do.
How did you get connected with Michael Badio?
A record label.
I remember the days when he was Michelangelo.
Yeah, I remember. It's funny because I was just me and Data were just texting each other back and forth not too long ago because we chat from time to time. Every venue I go to, he's got a signature on the wall. So me and him have a thing where when I go to the venues, I take a picture of it and I send it to him, and he tries to guess the venue that I'm at.
That's awesome.
So it's like a little game that we play. But anyways, the people at our record label, we were looking to do some cover songs in between, album 2 and album 3, and just to kind of bridge that gap a little bit and give fans something interesting to listen to. We reached out to our record label and we said, hey man, who are some musicians that, some names that you could throw away, some people that, a lot of other people would know, some interesting features. And they said, what do you think of Michael Badio? And I go, wait, what? And they're like, yeah, what do you think of Michael Badio? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So we were put in touch with them. We were communicating via email, and I said, hey man, what do you think of doing like a cool heavy metal version of Foxy Lady? And he said, yeah, dude, I'm down 100%. So he came down to Aeraco studio here in Chicago, and, he drove up, brought all his stuff out. We recorded him, and he kicked ass.
I remember his band Holland from way back in the day, in the mid-'80s, and they were such a great band local to the scene in Chicago. They had a mild hit with the song "Wake Up the Neighborhood." I think the album was Little Monsters, which I think is almost impossible to find now. But just a huge influence here in Chicago. That they used to play like the Thirsty Whale and the Gateway Theater, and some of those old school places that were around back in the day. And when I was on your website and I saw Michael Badio, I immediately went back to that 10-year-old, 11-year-old kid listening to this radio station called WVVX that would come on at like 8 o'clock at night and hearing "Wake Up the Neighborhood" by Holland. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's so cool that he recorded with them.
Yeah, I remember, and I told Badio this. It's funny. I go, dude, I remember seeing Nitro, the music video when I was in high school for Freight Train. And I remember not even thinking it was real. I go, what the hell is going on? And I told him this when I met him. I go, dude, I remember watching you on YouTube when I was like 15. And the amount of players that you've influenced is just insane. And then for you to be playing with another generation of players that you've influenced, I was like, it's just surreal to be here with you. And he was just like, yeah, man, during the 80s, we just wanted to be big, everything, fast guitar, biggest air, biggest, everything, the biggest name, biggest aura, everything you can imagine. I'm like, well, rich and accomplished, man, because, 20-something years later, you're here recording a single with me. So kind of had to pinch myself on that one. That was very cool.
So what is the future for Aeraco? I know we're wrapping up 2019 here in a couple of months. What does 2020 look like for you guys?
So we are going into the pre-production phases for album 3. 2019 will unfortunately probably not be any new music in 2019. I'm sorry, 2020. I'm in the wrong year here, man. 2020 will just be pure touring. We're just going to purely be doing shows and recording the new album. We all work, we all work day jobs. So we split our time between working day jobs, touring with music, and recording. So just to give us more time to kind of up the game, up the quality, up the ante of, as far as the quality of our album, we're going to be spending the rest of this year and a lot of 2020 really recording some great songs, touring, and, preparing for our next release, album 3.
When are you guys going to start touring in 2020? Right after the first of the year, or is there a certain date that you guys are going to start?
Yeah, so we're probably going to wind up starting, winter is kind of hibernation for us, as it is almost for every kind of goes to sleep at that point. But we'll be back probably right around February or March, all the way to the end of 2020, and then preparing to release hopefully sometime beginning of 2021 with new stuff.
I'm looking forward to it. I know a lot of your fans are looking forward to it. Like I said, my son follows you guys on Instagram. He's a huge fan. When he saw you guys with Diamond Head, I come from that Diamond Head generation, and I really enjoyed you guys. And we're driving back. He's like, that band Aeraco was really awesome, Dad. They were really cool. So that's, to connect with kids these days, 13, 14 years old, is huge because they're so distracted. They're so, with social media, they're so preoccupied with things. And one of the things I think is positive, I always use him as a gauge as to what's coming up. And when I see him and his friends wearing rock T-shirts, I know it's coming back because the kids are starting to listen to it again,
For sure, absolutely. And you know what? It's funny that you said that because for the longest time, we had fans that were more of the Diamond Head generation. They were more of the old school Metallica generation and Testament and Van Halen. That was more the generation. And now it's interesting because we're getting more and more people that are asking us to play more and more underage shows. We typically play at venues where there's a bar, there's a liquor license at stake, so it's difficult to get kids in the door. There's a lot going on there. But we're sitting back going, man, we need to figure out what we're going to wind up doing. We just played in the suburbs, had an insane turnout at the show that we played here up on the Northwest side, and that's kind of becoming commonplace where we tour, but we're getting more and more of a reaction of, hey, when are you gonna play a show where the kids can come because they want to come and see it, or when are you gonna play a show where kids that are under 18 or under 21 can come? It's a whole new issue for us because, like I said, we've been a lot of people that have been attracted to the music are people that have been attracted to old school, and they're typically people that can come out, they can drink, they can do that stuff. So now to get requests from kids that are just 10, 15 years younger than me going, dude, I want to come out to your shows. What the hell's going on? I'm going, this is pretty interesting. This is pretty cool. So I'm really glad he likes it. I'm honored that you like it because you've got great taste in music. So the fact that we've resonated with you and the young one means a lot, man.
Well, that's kind of become one of the bonds that I've had with my son is music. I remember his first show I took him to, we drove all the way to, I think it was Newport, Kentucky, to see Butch Walker.
Oh, wow.
And because it was Butch Walker, who's singer-songwriter, who's got really good stuff. He used to be in a band called Marvelous 3 and South Gang, and now he got his own solo stuff. He's a big, huge, gigantic producer in the music industry, but he does his solo stuff too. And my son really connected with one of his albums when he was like 5. He listened to one of his records all the time. So I'm looking at the tour dates, and I'm like, I can't take him to Chicago because it's an over 18 or whatever. I'm like, but on Saturday, there's a show in Kentucky. Let's load up the car, do the 4.5-hour drive, and let's go see him. He's loved music ever since. And, I've taken him to see Diamond Head, obviously, and Metallica, Iron Maiden, a lot of other bands. He's a big, huge fan of Rival Sons and Tyler Bryant. So, I love connecting with him. I love seeing his reaction to things. And, at least it's pleasant for me when he's listening to rock and roll in his room instead of other forms of music,
Man, I got to give you a pat on the back because, not all parents are like that. I know what it's like to have, a parent that's kind of an absentee and that isn't really there. And I know what it's like to have the other side of the spectrum too. We have a dad that uses music as much as he can to compensate for that and to fill a possible void that's there. And it did it for me. So the fact that you're going above and beyond to share that music and share that experience and connect with them is huge. It did a lot for my life. My dad has had some health issues as of lately, and when all this stuff happened, all that shit comes back. All those musical experiences come back. Just the time that I got to spend with my dad, playing music with him, and fucking just sitting there playing Jimmy 3 Steps 4 times a day, Leonard Skinner, or sitting there playing Honky Tonk Woman when I was miserable playing it because I'm like, man, dude, I want to play War Ensemble. What is this, man? I don't want to do this. But having that as a grown man now, where I'm married, I'm out and about, and I'm doing my own thing as a man, and looking at my dad, going, dude, the music that we shared, the memories that we have, we can look at each other now as two men and shake our heads and go, man, we share something, we share a bond with each other that nobody can fuck with, and it is purely and entirely because of music. So the fact that you have that with your son, my hat is 100% off to you, sir.
Well, thank you. Music has the power to break down barriers. It has the power to connect people from different backgrounds, from different points of view. It really is a way to heal. I've often used music myself when I've going through, a troubled time or a difficult time. Music is kind of like the drug. It's kind of like the medicine to help you get through things. And what's really cool now is how my son, who's 14, is telling me, hey, you should check out this band. You should listen to this band. These guys are really good. And I'm like, wow, this is really good. So he's developing a really good ear for good stuff. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. So, it's a way for me to get, stay connected with new music, because let's face it, a lot of people my age, in our mid 40s are not as open to new music as they should be. And, I've talked about this a lot on the podcast with different discussions, and how, you get the pushback from a lot of people who say, oh, new rock sucks and new this, no, it doesn't. You've got to open yourself up to listen to it, because
new rock doesn't suck, man. My response to that is you're just looking in the wrong places.
Yep.
Because there's new music everywhere. There is a plethora of new music. You just got to look in the right spots. If you're listening to the top 40, and hey, there's nothing wrong with that. If you like it, like I said, I listen to pop music all the time. But if you're sitting there listening to the top 40 going, oh man, new rock sucks, but you're using the radio to gauge new rock, you ain't in the right spot, man. You really ain't in the new spot. You got to join the forums. You got to hop on streaming. You got to hop on YouTube. You got to hop on the internet. You got to go to local shows. You got to go to look up the local music scene. Look up the small music venues, the small bar. Look up the subterraneans. Look up the elbow rooms. I know some of your listeners who are out of Chicago might not know, but you get it. Look up the venues. They have a maximum size. If you're above 250 occupants, you're at a fire hazard. Look up those venues. Go to those shows of bands that are coming in, and then you could really see the new up and comers of rock and roll, and see what kind of really good shit is out there. So, like I said, it wasn't me earlier breaking down new music like, nobody solos anymore. Nobody does this anymore. I use nobody in terms of what is popular right now, what is
right.
Consistently on the radio. It's an algorithm. It's a lot of the same stuff. And that's cool. That's what they're going for. Those bands, that's what they wanted. They went out, they hired a producer, they paid that producer a certain amount of money in cash, they paid that producer a certain amount of money in retails off the back end, and they said, hey, we want to break this band down to a top 40 band. We want to have a top 40 hit. And that producer said, all right, this is what you need to do. What is popular in a top 40 right now is ABC. That's what we got to do. And we got to incorporate your guys' little seasoning on top of that. That's what they do. And that's okay. But if that's what someone's looking to gauge, if rock is good or not right now, get away from that stuff. Go to the local music venues, hop on social media, hop on YouTube, look up local bands, look up, you know what I do to look at, to discover new music, and a lot of the connections I've made, I've actually looked at the flyers to like Rock USA, Rocklahoma, Rockfest, Lollapalooza, Coachella, and you know what? I'll go all the way to the bottom of the flyer.
I do the same thing.
And one by one, I will slowly but surely, some very good musical friends of mine, a band you should look up, a band called Solidify down in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Fucking awesome band. I found them because we submitted to play for Rocklahoma. We didn't get selected. They got selected a couple years back, and I sent them a congratulations email saying, "Hey man, we were one of the bands that submitted. We didn't get
chosen you guys, but it made me look your guys' band up, and I just want to say I love what you guys do. Now, guess what? We've played probably about 3 or 4 shows with those guys, and I love them. That's what I'm saying about building connections. That's what I'm saying about looking up new music, finding stuff that's fresh, because you know what? Rock ain't dead, man. Rock is more alive than it's ever been.
I 100% agree. We're going to have to end there, Ace. I do appreciate you coming on. Once again, Ace, the lead vocalist, co-lead guitar player from the band Aeraco. If you like straight-ahead rock and roll, modern, straight-ahead metal, you're going to like it in the vein of like an Armored Saint, Metal Church, Helloween, Dokken.
Hey, man, I really appreciate you. I appreciate your listeners. Like you said, if you want to give your earbuds a punch in the face, give us a listen, support local music. Jay, thanks very much, man. I had a great fucking time.
Well, thank you. Once again, this is Jay Scott, and you were listening to The Hook, the Ultimate Rock Community Podcast. Hope everyone has a great night, and we will chat again soon. Thanks.